horror movie needs a good villain, but what about a villain nobody can see, hear, or more importantly, stop? What about a villain that has had a presence in literally every other horror movie ever made, but never like this? What if the bad guy was death itself? This was the question posed by a film that came out in the year 2000, one that was made by a first-time director and performed by a young cast, but would go on to spawn a highly profitable and popular franchise. Final Destination was the first of 5 pictures that would eventually form the Destination verse, charting the plight of a group of teenagers who, after a premonition from one of them saves the group from a plane crash, find themselves being hunted down by the Invisible Reaper. Though subsequent installments would dip in quality, there's still a lot to be liked about the first movie, and plenty of interesting stories to tell from behind the scenes. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, here with 10 things you didn't know about Final Destination. Number 10. It began as an X-Files episode. Final Destination was directed by James Wong, who also helped co-write the screenplay with Glenn Morgan and the man who came up with the idea in the first place, Jeffrey Reddick. Reddick had been working at production studio New Line Cinema when he first imagined a story about a group of people who cheat death only to be pursued by the Grim Reaper. Except at the time, he didn't envision it as a feature film. Initially, Final Destination was a spec script for an episode of The X-Files. Reddick was going to write the script in the hopes of getting a TV agent, but a colleague at New Line suggested he could stretch it out into a longer format. It just so happened that both Wong and Morgan were working on The X-Files at the time. They saw the script, liked the idea, and offered to help Reddick get it made. The rest, as they say, is history. Interestingly, in Reddick's original idea, the man who had the premonition was none other than Scully's brother. I mean, how different things could have been. Number 9. It was inspired by real-life events. Okay, so that title might have been a bit misleading. There has never been a real-life instance of someone surviving a plane crash due to a premonition only to then be hunted down by an unseen spirit and brutally bumped off. Not yet, anyway. Reddick has spoken about how he got the idea for the story, and whilst a lot of it came from his own sick, twisted imagination, some elements of the narrative actually did play out in the real world. As Reddick explained in Bloody Disgusting, quote, "I read this story about a woman who was on vacation in Hawaii and her mum called her and said, 'Don't take the flight tomorrow. I have a really bad feeling about it.' She switched flights and the plane that she would have been on crashed. I thought, that's creepy. What if she was supposed to die on that flight?" Wow. Real pleasant thought there, Jeff. So maybe there is someone out there with psychic powers who genuinely did save her daughter from perishing in a fireball. Or most likely this woman just got very, very lucky. Number 8. The plane set took 2 months to build. The inciting incident of Final Destination is, of course, the demise of Flight 180. After Alex and his friends are ushered off the plane, it takes off, but only lasts a few minutes in the air before something goes horribly wrong. The flight malfunctions, leading to a section of the plane being ripped off before it explodes in mid-air, killing all aboard. To achieve the spectacular opening set piece of Alex's premonition, the Final Destination crew had to put in some serious work, as construction of the interior of Flight 180 took 2 whole months to complete. The whole thing was on a gimbal, which meant that it could be rotated up to 45 degrees side to side and 60 degrees front to back. This was done to make everything look as real as possible and to elicit genuine reactions from the extras involved. Devon S, who played Alex, said the screams that made it into the movie were real as the cast aboard the plane were thrown around whilst being filmed. Those poor people probably thought they were legit going to die. Number 7. Real news footage was used. In the wake of the Flight 180 disaster, news stations from across the country descend to tell the story of what happened. Rather than spend time and money filming their own fake news coverage, the production team decided to borrow from an actual aviation accident and one with quite the interesting history. TWA Flight 800 was a plane that took off from John F. Kennedy International Airport in 1996. Like Flight 180, it was also heading to Paris, albeit as part of a longer trip to Rome. And it too blew up shortly after takeoff, with all 230 passengers and crew losing their lives. This tragedy, the 3rd deadliest aviation disaster in US history, was reported heavily in the press, particularly as there were concerns that a terrorist plot had been behind it. With an abundance of footage available, the Final Destination team borrowed news clips of Flight 800 and put it in their movie. Jeffrey Reddick has said numerous times that this had no influence on his script, but even he can't deny the eerie similarities between his imaginary crash and this terrifyingly real one. Number 6. The train scene was the hardest to film. As it becomes abundantly clear to the survivors that death is coming for them, one decides to deny the ghoulish force the privilege of taking his life. Carter, a brutish jock who begins the movie as Alex's enemy, parks his car on a set of train tracks to escape death's relentless pursuit. When Alex, Clear, and Billy catch up to him, they manage to persuade him to keep on living. There's just one problem. Carter is now stuck in the car. What are the chances? Though Alex manages to rescue his former foe before the train strikes, behind the scenes, the crew went to great lengths to keep everyone involved in this scene safe. The stunt, overseen by SFX supervisor Terry Sonderhoff, was achieved by cutting the car in half before shooting began. Sonderhoff and his team had to be incredibly careful that no sheet metal was left in the vehicle in case it flew off during the crash and injured somebody nearby. Of course, the great irony here is that this is exactly how Billy dies moments after the train hits the car. Number 5. Devon S fell asleep on set. You'd have thought it would have been impossible to take a nap during a movie featuring plane crashes, house explosions, and all-round murder and mayhem, but its lead actor found a way. During the opening scene, prior to the teens arriving at the airport, Alex is sleeping before he gets woken up to set off and board the flight. Devon S was told to pretend to be asleep in order to film this scene, only he was so tired, he accidentally dozed off for real. And get this! He managed to sleep for 4 hours, which is clearly a talent most people would kill for. In a sweet gesture, the crew suspended filming while Sauer caught up on his Z's, letting the actor rest before picking up the scene. He was pulling double duty, working on a film called The Guilty at the same time, so everyone clearly thought he deserved a break. That is nice and all, but it doesn't bear thinking about how much those 4 hours must have cost. This may have been the most expensive nap in human history. Number 4. The deleted scene baby. One of the great things about DVDs was and is the plenty of space for special features, including deleted scenes. Now, editors didn't have to worry about chucking out hours of good material. They could just bung it on the DVD release and go home happy. And this is precisely what happened when Final Destination got its home release, as fans of the show were treated to a number of scenes that might have been, including this revelation about Clear Rivers. Clear is one of the survivors who makes it right to the end of the movie, although it's clear that death still isn't through with her. In one deleted scene found on the DVD release, Clear discovers that she is pregnant, later giving birth to a bouncy baby boy. Because of the rules of death, the creation of new life cancels out Clear's debt, which she is ecstatic about. Although chances are Death will probably still find a way to claim her. Death doesn't like to play fair. Clear names the baby Alex, as in this version of the movie, he dies saving her from some electrical wires. Number 3. Assassination hints. If you're able to get through Final Destination without being distracted by all the blood and bits of people's heads flying around, you might be able to spot several references to famous people who were also taken before their time. The movie is littered with references to political figures who were assassinated, beginning with the fact that the doomed flight leaves from John F. Kennedy Airport. One of Miss Newton's coffee cups is from Mr. Abraham High, a reference to Abraham Lincoln, who was murdered by John Wilkes Booth in 1865. And finally, the license plate on the car that Carter nearly gets smushed in contains the letters RFK, which are the initials of Robert Francis Kennedy, JFK's younger brother, who was also assassinated while running for president in 1968. This sort of attention to detail is exactly what film buffs go nuts for. Subtle clues that don't distract from the story, but make it so much better when you know what you're looking for. And while we're on the topic of dead celebrities, the film also features 6 songs by John Denver, who also died in a plane crash in 1997. Number 2. The character names are tributes. How do scriptwriters come up with the names of their characters? Do they just pull them out of a box? Ask their kids? Name the ones they like after loved ones and the ones they don't after old enemies? In this case, they're all nods to names that helped pave the way for movies like Final Destination to exist. Alex Browning and his family all take their name from Todd Browning, an early pioneer of horror known for directing the 1932 movie Freaks. The Todd part of Browning's name was given to Todd Wagner, Alex's best friend. Billy Hitchcock naturally comes from Alfred Hitchcock, whilst FBI agent Schreck is named for Max Schreck, the German actor who famously brought Count Orlok to the screen in the original Nosferatu. Some names are just straight up copies of famous people, like French teacher Val Newton, who shares her name with a Russian writer from the 1940s, and Todd's father George, who was named after an old Universal horror producer. Interestingly, Todd, spelt as it is with just one D instead of 2, is also the German word for death. Spooky. Number 1. The SpiderMan connection. Had things gone a little differently, Final Destination might be remembered very differently today. During the casting process for the film, several names were flung around for the roles of Alex and Claire. Two of those names were Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, a couple of years before they would star as Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Maguire had made a few appearances in big movies like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and The Ice Storm by this point, whilst Dunst had been a child star in the likes of Interview with a Vampire and Jumanji, but they had never acted together. Chances are, had they both been involved in this project, they may not have taken on the roles that would define them to an entire generation of superhero fans. Whilst it would have been great to see these two in a radically different scenario, fans will never know how a Final Destination starring Maguire and Dunst would look, as both actors turned down the parts. Maybe they had premonitions about it, or maybe they just got better offers elsewhere. It was probably that.